The physical world is really based on duality. Essentially what happened was when God created everything, he split himself first into a series of souls that is essentially the God taking down about an eighth of an inch. So they're extraordinarily powerful, and one of the mistaken things that we have, if you'll let me erase this. So essentially the thought that we have, generally speaking, is that this is our body, or if you're a woman, that's your body. And the soul is some little thing that floats around inside your body like that. What I really discovered was it's really the other way around, and that if you take the words, we are made in the image and likeness of God, very almost literally. So if everything is God, the universe exists within God like that, and then he splits himself up into a bunch of different souls, blah, 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 blah. And so now what you have is your soul, and inside that soul is your series of subtle bodies, kind of like this, looking very much like a gingerbread man apparently. And then inside that body is the physical body. So the soul is the container for the body and not the other way around. So what you're looking at is, by the way, this metaphysical body, the subtle bodies that exist, or that the physical body exists within, those interacting outside of the edges of it, that interact outside our body, is commonly what we refer to as the aura. That's why we see various colors depending on how astute you are. It's kind of a mix of all the subtle bodies of various different vibrations. Each vibration has a different color. Okay, you don't need to know that. That's just a basic rundown of how our bodies work in relationship to the universal body. But what happens is God creates the universe, or God creates the souls, and in that moment relativity is created. In other words, you know one thing by knowing another thing, knowing what it is in relationship to the other thing. So in other words, for the souls, what you have is now the soul can look back on the whole of it and know itself in relationship to the whole of it, which is God. And then God can look at the pieces of himself, which all exist within him. Sorry for the genderized colloquialism. But so the body exists. Sorry, the soul can look on the whole and understand itself better, and then God can look at the pieces and know himself better by knowing one thing by knowing the opposite. So in other words, relativity is very, very important. It's the fundamental aspect of creation. Without relativity, there is no point to it. And the whole reason for this is simply that God wishes to experience himself. And the best way to do that is to experience what he's not. So God is essentially, is the high vibrational loving energy of the universe. It's also the energy of creation, the energy of life, and the energy of love and consciousness. So there is this beingness that is God, that is all pervasive. Okay, I use the word God. By the way, you don't have to use the word God. You can use whatever term you want to use: cosmic consciousness, universal consciousness, the universe, collective consciousness, love, life, whatever. It's all kind of the same thing. So you'll hear me occasionally refer to it as source or God. It's all the same thing. Sometimes the universe or collective consciousness or whatever. I kind of use them all interchangeably. So that's basically relativity. Everything in the universe is created around relativity. Now, so God knows himself as all of it by knowing himself as the pieces of it, right? You can't know yourself as, you can't know what hot is unless you know what cold is. You can't know what up is without knowing what down is. So in other words, without relativity, there is no knowingness. If everything is love, love has no meaning. It's like, the way I kind of think about it, it's like if you're blind and you've never experienced light before, light and dark have no meaning to you. Everything, it just is. It's, you know, there's a blankness there. It has no concept to you, right? Without sight, you know, you can't, you can sort of form a general idea of what an elephant looks like, but, you know, if you're blind, you don't know what an elephant looks like because you've never seen it. You might be able to sort of get a general vagueness of it, but there's no meaning to it. And really, without experiencing hot and cold, you don't really know the difference between the two. And so the reason for the physical universe and for our physical bodies is to experience duality, which is relativity in its most extreme form. So in that we have, in duality, in the physical universe, we have a bunch of dualistic pairs, okay? And those pairs help us to know ourselves by knowing who we're not. So in other words, in the dualistic pairs, we have things like up and down, obviously, as I just mentioned, left and right, hot, cold, male, female, etc., etc. So with those dualistic pairs, we can understand and interact and experience the world. And you'll also notice that, let's say, again, if you just have hot without cold, hot has no meaning. But you also notice that hot is a relative term. It's relative to what? Is a burner on a stove hot? Well, again, it's relative to what? So, yeah, it's hot in comparison to the countertop or to our hand when we put our hand on the hot burner and we burn our hands, but it's really cold in comparison to a star, right? You know, left and right are relative, up and down, like big and small. Like, is a mountain big? Well, it's a relative term. The mountain is big in relation or relative to an ant. It's small relative to a planet, right? So relativity is a fundamental aspect of creation, right? You only know one thing relative to another. You say, what does this have to do with happiness? Well, don't worry about it. I'm getting to it. So basically what happens in relative space, we have this opportunity to experience anything that we desire, okay? And with these dualistic pairs, we're able to understand whatever we need to do to know ourselves as ourselves by knowing ourselves as not ourselves, okay?